So one of the gifts of being a pastor here at Christ Lutheran is being connected with a whole variety of different ministries that we have here, one of which is our Little Lamb Preschool. And at Little Lamb Preschool, over the years, I have visited chapel and helped with Christmas programs and had that time with these little guys. And I've come to learn the songs pretty well. And they always sing this one because it's really great for little people. It's very repetitive. Get ready, get ready, get ready for the baby. Get ready for little baby Jesus. And then we hear how Mary, and then Joseph, and then we all get ready for the baby. And so I've been thinking about getting ready for the baby and remembering in our household when we were first getting ready for a baby, there's this sense that you have some things you're supposed to do to prepare, right? There are the nesting kind of things. You've got to get your act together before the child comes. But in our case, we ended up with some transition in our lives right as a new baby was coming, and we moved across the ocean. So my spouse was adjusting to his new job. I was newly adjusting to not having a job or expecting this job to arrive at any moment. We were displaced in a lot of ways. We got there about 3 weeks before the expected arrival. And so you better believe we were in church, the same church, 3 weeks in a row because we had no people. And we needed to meet some people and would like to find some people. Lots of other reasons we went to worship too, but boy, in those weeks, it was to find our people. Our apartment was bare. Our household was still being shipped somewhere across the Atlantic, had a while yet before it arrived, so there was no nicely decorated nursery. We had a pot that we bought. We had a knife that we bought and some plastic porch furniture that sufficed for a place to eat, and a bed that turned into a sofa, so we had somewhere to sit, and a baby bed that I had checked in my luggage on the way over here that sort of nestled up next to the other bed, and that was it. A little bit of clothes, but not a lot because babies grow quickly, and the rest was coming on a boat and a train and a truck. We thought we had a few more days to be ready. Didn't yet have a bag packed or anything, and it turned out that the doctor said, oh no, tonight you will be going to the hospital to be induced. And so we got our act together a little bit in order to at least arrive at the right place at the right time with a loaner car seat from the next door neighbor and attempting to communicate with hospital staff in our 10-year lapsed high school French. Sitting there the night before, still trying to settle on names. We did not exactly have our act together, at least not in the ways that HGTV says you're supposed to when a baby is coming, right? With the elephant-themed nursery and the bedding and the stroller set and all of that. And of course, if you have been a parent or know parents, you probably know that it's in fact after the child arrives that you realize how very little you have it together. The picture the world paints of how you have your act together for a baby and our reality felt pretty far apart. And those feelings of displacement, of not having it all together in sort of a cosmic sense, reverberates for me whenever I sit with Mary and Joseph's story. Nothing is going according to plan in this story. Nothing is normal. Now, themed nurseries and stroller systems, that wasn't the way they would prepare, of course. But every society has a sense of how you get your act together to welcome a baby. And whatever the definition was in Mary's world, they are not meeting the mark. First of all, their relationship is awkward, right? This thing has happened with God and an angel and a baby that is not the way things normally work. And Mary has said yes. Joseph is willing to come along for the ride, but it's got to be weird. It's got to be awkward, even if the relationships they were expecting weren't the mutual ones with love and friendship that we hope for in a marriage. it's got to be odd to try to share a household with this big thing in between you. Even if you said yes, their family is surely the subject of a lot of conversation. And all the way to Bethlehem, I suspect the conversation went on. Joseph's family knows a thing or two. So, what does having your act together when your family is not fitting the way you think it should? And then they're displaced, right? The emperor says, you will go and be counted. And guess what? You will go and you will be counted, whether you want to or not. Whether it's a good time for you to travel, whether it's comfortable even to travel at this point, you do as you've been told in this world. You go. So they went. And they're far away from whatever normal preparations would be getting your act together for the birth of a baby. Presumably, Mary would have had women from her family, certainly from her community that she knew, to help with labor and birth and this new baby. They're not there. Whatever familiarity of home, whatever little ways a mother might prepare the family space to welcome this new child, to get things together, that's back home. Nothing is there. They've been dislocated. And we don't know exactly from the way Luke tells it. Did it happen immediately at the end of this miserable journey? Or had they been there a while, with Mary measuring the distance back home day after day as the time passed? Maybe they'd hoped, maybe they'd assumed that they'd get back before it was time, but nope. With a baby, when it's time, it's time. There's no way out but through. Luke doesn't tell us if it was a barn or a stable or a cave or the first floor of Joseph's extended family's home where you would bring the animals in for warmth. It was a clean, pleasant way to be. We don't know. I think he doesn't tell us because it doesn't matter. The point is they're not where they're supposed to be. They're not at home, and the baby is in a feed trough. That's not the picture of having your act together in preparation for a baby. Honestly, from the outside, this whole story looks as if God has no particular interest in having God's own act together. This is a world with a powerful emperor, and yet God relies on the consent of a vulnerable young woman, nobody, to act in the world. This is going to be the one? Her child? What kind of authority is he going to have? What sort of a platform to announce the coming of God's kingdom will Mary's kid have? In a world where the decrees of the emperor cause whole populations to uproot and shuffle around so they can stand in line to be counted, why would God give the most precious message to the smelly shepherds? Shepherds are so suspect in the world that Mary lives in that their testimony is not even welcome in court. How is anyone going to believe it when they say, this is the one? In a world where everyone has learned again and again that peace usually comes at the end of a legion of swords, who is going to believe an infant in a pile of hay is the one to bring peace on earth? There are much better places, much more obvious people. There are more appropriate, dignified welcomes to be had in this world for the Lord of all. Surely the God of the universe, could do a bit better. Do better in having the divine act together. It's odd. Here is this little, ridiculous, improbable baby. Here in the middle of a world of chaos and fear, instability and death, right here in the middle of it all, God in the flesh. Friends, God is well aware that we do not have our act together. Any of us. And if we're honest, you know and I know that it's not just that we're not quite prepared with all the details and aesthetics in place and the nursery painted. We don't manage the more substantial things, do we? Things like basic kindness. How many of you could compete with me in the rush of preparing everything, getting your act together for the holidays, compete for crankiest person in the room? Yeah, has that happened somewhere in these past weeks? We put all kinds of effort into appearances. And most of the time, or an awful lot of the time anyways, it kind of papers over what's going on underneath. We paper over our selfishness, or we paper over our loneliness. We paper over our grief that is kind that jumps you this time of year, or our fear that kind of lives with us all the time in the back of our heads. We paper over the disappointments and the hurts in our lives, some of which come out of the blue, and others of which we have carefully created our own little messes. And the truth is, as little as you and I have our acts together, as far as our realities are from our hopes, the world is just a sum of its parts. Altogether, we drop the ball. We live in a nation that can't seem to relate to each other as neighbors. We're part of economies that produce appalling excess and shameful need. We close ourselves off from the rest of the world, hoping to keep ourselves safe, but we don't seem to have the will or the courage or the creativity or wisdom to deal with the hate or the despair and the violence that overflow right in our middle, right in our communities. Most of the time, it seems like humanity isn't even real sure what the act is supposed to be, much less have it together. So if God in the flesh had come to some small sliver of this world that was passing for having it together, I don't know what that would be, but I don't think it would be good news for me. And I don't think it would be good news for you. And I don't think it would be good news for the real world we live in. One of the names for Jesus is Emmanuel. It means God with us. With us. And Luke gives us the careful details that he does in the version of Jesus' birth that we heard so we can understand what God with us means. God knows we're never going to have our act together. God comes to us in Jesus because we are never going to have our act together on our own. God has to come to us. The one we've been waiting for, the one we truly need. He came in the middle of all of it. A surprise pregnancy, a poor kid, a backwater province under the thumb of a violent empire, a displaced family, a feed trough, shepherds, the middle of the night. This is how God chooses to be with us, right in the middle of all of the struggles and the mess. This little baby is going to grow. This little baby will live. This little baby will die to fill out the promise of the manger, that there's nowhere, that there's nothing that can be separating us from God's love. This little baby is going to willingly walk to a violent and unjust execution. This little baby is going to be wrapped again in bands of cloth and placed in a tomb to break the hold of sin, to break the hold of death on every single part of our existence, the middles of the nights, the God-forsaken little mangers off in a corner somewhere, all of it. The good news that Luke wants us to hear tonight, that the angels sing, that the shepherds tell, that Mary treasures. The good news for us tonight is this. Exactly at the heart of whatever ache, whatever brokenness you bring with you tonight, those things that only come to the surface when the lights get a little bit lower and we're not making eye contact anymore. Whatever backwater provinces you have in your world, or vulnerable young women, or violent empires, whatever pathetic feed troughs and smelly shepherds are a part of your story, that is where God comes to be with you. Precisely in the places where the truth comes out. Here is the baby. Where the truth comes out that we do not have our act together, that the world is coming apart at the seams. That is where God chooses to be with us and promises never to leave or forsake us. Madeleine L'Engle is one of my favorite authors, and this is a poem she wrote called First Coming. He didn't wait till the world was ready, till men and nations were at peace. He came when the heavens were unsteady and prisoners cried out for release. He did not wait for the perfect time. He came when the need was deep and great. He dined with sinners in all their grime and turned water into wine. He did not wait till hearts were pure. In joy, he came to a tarnished world of sin and doubt, to a world like ours of anguish, shame. He came, and his light would not go out. He came to a world which did not mesh, to heal its tangles, shield its scorn. In the mystery of the Word made flesh, the maker of the stars was born. We cannot wait till the world is sane to raise our songs with joyful voice. For to share our grief and to touch our pain, he came with love. Rejoice, rejoice.